It's not the grand gestures that save us, it's the unnoticed ones. 12 Marines in full dress blues didn't belong at a small-town wedding, especially not one held in a garden behind a bakery. Let us know in the comments section below, what do you think led to their arrival? Sandra Portman had a habit she never talked about. Each morning at 4:55 a.m., 20 minutes before her bakery opened, she'd unlock the back door, set a paper bag on the green wooden bench near the alley, and walk away without looking back. The bag always had the same thing: a cinnamon twist, a bottle of water, and a black coffee. No cream, no sugar. She'd never once seen him take it, but she always knew when he had. He never left a thank you, never left a note, just the empty coffee bottle placed gently under the bench, always capped, always clean. And that was fine with her. The townsfolk of Copper Ridge, Virginia, knew Sandra as the sweet girl who ran Portman's Hearth and Honey, the best bakery for 3 counties, though she never advertised. Her pastries were flaky, her cookies warm, and her wedding cakes stacked like sculptures. She moved like she baked, carefully, deliberately, always with something on her mind. They didn't know that behind the bakery a quiet ritual had taken shape. They didn't know that for 6 years Sandra had fed a ghost. Not a literal ghost, though sometimes it felt that way. The man never made a sound. She only knew his name because of a folded military ID she'd once found half frozen to the alley wall during a snowstorm. Surgeon Nathan Cole. It had looked like it hadn't been touched in years, and maybe that was the point. He hadn't come the next morning, or the next, but on the 3rd day the bag disappeared again, and from then on she never mentioned the ID, never asked questions, only left food and hope. The town didn't ask questions either, not about the bench, not about Sandra's early mornings. They thought she was prepping dough or cleaning ovens. The truth was more complicated than flour and yeast. She didn't know why she did it, not exactly. She just remembered the first time she saw him, standing beside the dumpster in the alley, soaked from the rain and too proud to step into the light. She had watched from the kitchen window and waited to see if he'd leave. He didn't. Instead, he'd turned slowly and sat on the bench with a soldier's posture, rigid but tired. He didn't ask for food, didn't beg, didn't speak. The next morning she left a bag. The morning after he came again, and they never exchanged a single word. It became a kind of secret contract. She gave, he accepted, and neither of them acknowledged each other directly. In a world where everything needed explanation, Sandra liked that this didn't. She didn't know his story, only that he limped slightly when he walked, that his coat had once been a Marine's, that some nights she found boot prints in the frost, perfect and solitary, and a slight dent in the bench cushion. She liked to believe he was okay, that maybe the food helped, that maybe in some quiet way he was healing. But the truth was, she had no idea, and part of her feared that the moment she asked, the moment she broke the silence, the man would vanish forever. It was on a Tuesday that her fiancé, Jonah, brought it up, kindly but directly. "I saw you this morning," he said, sipping his coffee as she kneaded dough in the pre-dawn kitchen light. "Saw me what?" she replied, though she already knew. "You left something out by the bench. I was coming to drop off those new cake boxes. You didn't hear me." She didn't answer. He set the mug down and leaned against the counter. "Sandra? Who's it for?" "I don't know his name," she said quietly. "Not really. He never talks. Just takes the food." "For how long?" 6 years. Jonah blinked. 6 years? She nodded. He didn't argue, didn't scold, just picked up the bag of powdered sugar and said, "Okay." It was why she loved him. Jonah was a high school music teacher who played piano like a cathedral organist and never made her feel small for caring too much. He didn't need to understand everything. He just needed to know why she believed it mattered. That was enough. Their wedding was scheduled for next month. Nothing fancy, just a garden ceremony behind the bakery, chairs in rows, flowers from the same field where Sandra's parents were married 30 years ago. She didn't expect guests from outside town, just family, friends, the people who'd watched her grow up with flour on her nose and calluses on her palms. But she hoped, secretly, deeply, that maybe he'd come. Not in a suit, not with an RSVP, but maybe just to stand at the edge of the alley and nod. The idea felt foolish. He probably didn't even know her name. Still, on the corner of the wedding invitation, she wrote, "For you, in case you want to come. Same bench. I'll know." She left it in the bag with the cinnamon twist and walked back inside. That morning he took the food, but left the invitation. And something else? A folded napkin with 6 words in sharp, angular handwriting. "I'll be there. I owe you." Sandra stared at the note for a long time, her heart pounding louder than the mixer beside her. She traced the edge of the napkin with trembling fingers. No one had ever seen his handwriting before, not even his face in the daylight. She tucked the note into the pocket of her apron, close to her heart, and for the first time in 6 years she smiled before the ovens were even warm. The last thing Sandra Portman expected was for her wedding to feel watched. Not in a sinister way, more like a presence she couldn't see but felt. Like standing in a room and sensing someone behind you, just out of frame. The day before the ceremony, she was arranging sunflowers in mason jars when she caught herself glancing at the alley entrance for the 3rd time. No one was there, of course not, but still, she looked. And not because she was anxious, because she was hoping. Jonah noticed. "You're thinking about him," he said softly, adjusting his tie in the mirror behind her. "I don't know what I'm thinking," she replied. "It just matters more than I thought it would." Jonah walked up behind her and rested his hands on her shoulders. "Then it matters." "That's enough." She nodded, swallowing the emotion rising in her throat. She didn't have the words for it. How do you explain to someone that a ghost of a man you never knew, never spoke to, could matter so deeply, could anchor something inside you that you didn't even realize was drifting? The rest of the day passed in quiet, nervous preparation. The garden lights were strung, white chairs wiped clean of pollen. Jonah's students from the music department set up a modest sound system, and a table of finger foods began to take shape near the bakery's back door. Inside, the scent of vanilla and warm butter hung in the air like a comforter. Sandra had spent all week baking her own wedding cake, 3 layers of almond sponge with raspberry cream filling. It was tradition, she said. She didn't trust anyone else with the job. Her dress hung in the back office, a modest lace thing her grandmother once wore. Nothing flashy, just something old, something honest. Even as friends trickled in to offer hugs, laughter, and celebratory wine, part of her remained half-turned toward the alley, toward the bench that had never once asked for anything, and had somehow come to mean everything. By the time the sun dipped below the copper rooftops of Main Street, the ceremony was ready, and she still hadn't seen him. She tried not to show her disappointment. It was silly, really, to think he would come. Maybe he wrote the note out of guilt. Maybe he was just being kind. She told herself it didn't matter. Told herself the day was still perfect, still hers. She smoothed her dress, adjusted the ribbon at her waist, and stepped into the garden to the quiet sound of a string quartet her cousin had assembled from church. Jonah was waiting at the arbor, hands clasped, nerves hidden behind his kind eyes. The crowd turned. And then she saw them. 12 men, lined along the back row, standing, not sitting, tall, straight-backed, their uniforms crisp, immaculate, marine dress blues. Sandra's breath hitched. They stood in complete silence, no clapping, no fanfare, just reverence. In the center, seated between 2 of the youngest Marines, was a man in a charcoal jacket that didn't quite match the rest. His boots were polished but scuffed near the heel. His hair, streaked with silver, was trimmed to regulation, but grown out enough to suggest time had passed since he last needed to keep it that way. And his eyes, those eyes, were unmistakable. SGT. Nathan. He sat quietly, as if unsure whether to stand, but when Sandra met his gaze, something passed between them, something old and real and wordless. She smiled. He stood. And when he did, every Marine around him snapped into salute, simultaneous, sharp, and silent. The crowd gasped softly. Someone whispered, "What's going on?" Sandra didn't stop walking. She stepped forward with steady grace, past friends, past family, and met Jonah beneath the arbor with hands trembling only slightly. The ceremony continued as planned. The vows were spoken, simple, heartfelt, and sealed with a kiss that made even the oldest relatives tear up. The applause was warm, but still, a quiet hum under the unspoken presence of the uniformed men. Sandra never stopped smiling. Afterward, as guests moved to the long tables for cake and dancing, she pulled gently away from the crowd and walked toward the alley. Toward him. He stood beside the bench now, hat in his hands, eyes low. She paused, a few feet from him. "You came," she said. "I said I would," he replied. His voice was low, coarse with age and wear, but steady. "You brought the whole damn platoon?" A faint smile tugged at his mouth. "They volunteered?" She tilted her head, studying him. "Why?" He looked down at the bench, then back at her. "Because sometimes the smallest acts change everything, and the Corps doesn't forget when someone saves one of their own." "I didn't," she began. He raised a hand gently. "You did more than you know." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small folded American flag. Not a full-sized one. This was smaller, fitted into a polished wooden case. There was a plaque on it. Her name. "6 years ago," he said, "I was sleeping in a ditch behind a bus depot. I hadn't eaten in 3 days. I'd stopped caring. I was going to disappear." She blinked, unsure whether to interrupt. "But then I found your bench, that coffee, that cinnamon twist. Every day it reminded me someone still saw me, that I mattered, and I kept showing up because I didn't want to disappoint the stranger who cared enough to leave it." Sandra's throat tightened. "I told a friend," he continued. "One of the guys I served with, he told another. Word got around. There were days I couldn't make it. Others showed up in my place, quietly, to make sure you didn't think the food wasn't needed anymore." Her hand flew to her mouth. "You fed more of us than you know," he said. "And today, we wanted you to know we remember." He held out the flag. Sandra reached for it, tears falling freely now. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. He looked her dead in the eye. "You deserve more than we can give. But this is a start." She held the case close to her chest. Behind them, the Marines stood still, watchful, respectful, unmoving. Sandra Portman, the quiet baker, the woman who fed a ghost for 6 years, stood in her wedding dress and wept with joy for the first time in her life. Not because of what she received, but because someone, somewhere, finally saw the invisible thread of kindness she had laid down, and chose to pull it forward into the light. 2 weeks passed before Sandra received the letter. It arrived in an unmarked envelope, hand-delivered by someone who clearly wasn't from the Postal Service. A young man with a crew cut, sunglasses, and a kind of posture that only came from boot camp. He didn't say a word, just nodded once, handed her the envelope, and walked back down the alley without a sound. No return address, no stamp, just her name written in precise block lettering across the front, Sandra Portman. She turned the envelope over in her flour-dusted hands. The bakery had just closed for the afternoon. The ovens still radiated warmth, and the scent of caramelized sugar clung to the walls like old wallpaper. She set the envelope down next to a cooling tray of shortbread and stared at it for a long moment, as if it might disappear if she blinked. Then she opened it. Inside was a single sheet of thick cream paper folded in half. At the top, the Marine Corps insignia was faintly embossed, barely noticeable unless the light caught it just right. The handwriting was familiar, square, military, precise. "Sandra, if you're reading this, then I've already done what I came to do. The wedding wasn't just a debt repaid, it was a beginning. And now it's time to close the loop. There's something I never told you, something I need you to know, not because I think you need closure, but because I owe you the truth. Meet me at the bench, midnight, alone. She read the note 3 times, her fingers tightening around the paper each time. Jonah found her standing still at the kitchen table, the letter curled in her hand like it had grown roots. "Another one?" he asked, gently. She nodded. "Is it him?" She nodded again. He didn't ask more. He just pulled out a chair and said, "I'll wait up." That night, the town of Copper Ridge fell into its usual hush. Street lights buzzed gently over narrow sidewalks. The bakery windows were dark. The sign flipped to "closed," and the scent of sugar had long faded into the night. But Sandra didn't sleep. She walked into the kitchen barefoot, unlocked the back door, and stepped out into the alley. The bench was there, just as it had always been. Faded green paint, a crack in the wood, a memory sealed into every splinter. Nathan was already sitting. His figure barely moved, shadowed under the soft halo of the alley's only light. He looked older now, or maybe just more complete. Not haunted, just quiet. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said. "I wasn't sure you'd still be here," she replied. He gave a small nod, his gaze not quite meeting hers. "I'm leaving tomorrow," he said. "Where?" "Montana. There's a retreat up there. A place for guys like me, off-grid. Real peaceful. I think I've earned a little quiet." Sandra crossed her arms, more from instinct than cold. "I thought the wedding was the last time," she said. Nathan nodded. "It was supposed to be." "Then why the note?" He was silent for a long moment, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a smaller envelope. He handed it to her. She opened it. Inside was a photograph. A grainy black and white, old, clearly weathered. 2 Marines in full gear, sandbags in the background, heat haze in the sky. One of them was unmistakably a younger Nathan. The other had a crooked grin and a half-burned letter in his hand. Sandra's brows furrowed. "That man?" Nathan said, voice low. "That's Staff Sergeant Will McAllister. We served together. He died in Fallujah." Sandra waited. Nathan didn't blink. "He was my best friend, my battle buddy. Saved my life more than once. Before the last op, he made me promise that if anything happened to him, I'd look out for his little sister." Sandra stared at the photo again. Her heart skipped. "My parents had me late," she said slowly. "Will was 17 years older than you," Nathan confirmed. "He talked about you constantly. Said you'd grown up loving books and honey and that you used to make pretend cookies out of clay. Said the only thing he was ever afraid of was not being around to see you grow up." Sandra's mouth went dry. "I never met him," she whispered. "He died before I even started school." Nathan nodded. "And I failed him." "Now you—" He cut her off gently. "I failed him for years. When he died, I broke. Left the Corps after my last deployment. Drank, wandered, lost myself. I couldn't even remember your name for a while. I had a photo, sure, but I didn't know you. And then, one day..." He looked at the bench. "You left a pastry." Sandra felt like the wind had been knocked out of her. "He didn't know it was you," she said. "I know," he replied. "That's what made it real." They sat in silence. A train hummed faintly in the distance. Somewhere, a dog barked once, then went quiet. "You kept your promise," she said finally. "Not soon enough, but you kept it." He looked at her, really looked this time. "I couldn't save your brother," he said. "But I could make sure his kindness lived on. And I could honor it the only way I knew how, by making sure his little sister never felt invisible." Sandra wiped her cheek with the back of her sleeve. Nathan stood. He took out a small package, wrapped in brown paper, and handed it to her. He wrote this the week before he died. For you. I've been carrying it for a long time." She clutched it to her chest, shaking. Nathan nodded once, a clean military motion. "I'm proud of you," he said. So would he be. She stepped forward and hugged him, tentatively at first, then tighter as he didn't let go. "You, Mather," she whispered. For a long moment, neither of them said a word. Then he turned and walked down the alley, not limping any more. His steps were steady, measured, free. Sandra stood in the glow of the light, the package still held tight in her hands. She didn't open it right away. Some things are meant to be opened in the quiet, when the world is still, when ghosts are finally at peace. She sat down on the bench, where it had all begun, and waited for the first light of morning. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the alley, painting golden stripes on the cracked brick wall behind the bench. Sandra sat quietly, the package still unopened in her lap. Her hands rested gently on the worn paper, fingers brushing its edges with reverence. The street was quiet, save for the low rustle of leaves and the distant rumble of a delivery truck making its morning rounds. She hadn't moved since Nathan walked away, not because she was frozen, but because something inside her felt settled. Like a wheel that had been spinning too long had finally come to a stop. She looked down at the package. It wasn't heavy, just thick enough to hold a few folded sheets, maybe a photo or two. The tape had yellowed, a small corner was frayed, but the handwriting, bold, neat, unmistakably military, still read clear. For Sandra. When she's ready. With a steady breath, she peeled back the paper. Inside was a letter. Several, actually. The top one was dated 3 days before Staff Sergeant Will McAllister's final deployment. Sandra unfolded it with trembling hands. "Hey, little bug, you probably don't remember me. I've only seen you twice, and you were still in diapers, so I don't blame you. But I've got this weird need to talk to you, even if I never get the chance. So here goes. Being your big brother has always been the quiet part of me. The part I don't talk about around the guys, the part I think about in the spaces between firefights and long patrols. I carried your baby photo in my pack, next to my letters from Mom, and when the nights get hard, I look at your little smile and remember why I signed up to fight in the first place. Feel why. You and every other little sister or little brother who should get to grow up safe, eat cookies, and fall asleep without hearing mortars in the distance. If you're reading this, then I didn't make it home. And if that's true, I need you to know something. You're going to be okay. You're going to grow up strong, brave, kind, because that's who we are. It's in our blood. There's a man named Nathan Cole. He's my best friend in this world. If I'm gone, I've asked him to find you, watch over you. Not to be your guardian, no. You won't need one. Just someone to remind you you're not alone. Trust him. If he ever comes to you, even in silence, even from the shadows, trust him. And if no one else ever says this to you in a way that matters, hear it from me. I love you, Bug. Now go make something beautiful out of this life. I'll be watching." Well, the paper trembled in her hands. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Not from grief, but from something gentler, deeper. A reunion, long overdue. A voice she'd never heard in adulthood, finally coming home to rest in her heart. She smiled, even as she wept. The second letter was shorter, handwritten by Nathan. No date, just a single paragraph. You gave me a reason to come back from the edge. Every cup of coffee, every pastry, every morning I thought I couldn't keep going, I remembered the bench. And you? This world can feel heavy, Sandra, but you carried part of my burden without ever asking why. That's heroism. And I wanted you to know. Keep the bench. Make it yours. Then say. She folded the letters with care and placed them back in the wrapping. Her fingers lingered on the paper, on the ghost of her brother's voice. Then she looked up. and saw the bakery's back wall bathed in warm light, as though it too was waking up. Sandra stood and stretched, her spine popping gently. Her wedding ring caught the light. She traced it absently with her thumb, then walked back inside to begin her morning routine. But something had changed. She didn't head straight to the mixer. She didn't preheat the ovens. Instead, she took out a new sheet of paper, a permanent marker, and a strip of tape. She wrote carefully, thoughtfully, and walked back out to the alley. She knelt in front of the bench, ran her hand over the wood one last time, and then taped the sign to the backrest. The morning bench. Free coffee, free kindness. No questions, no judgments. If you need something warm, take it. If you want to give something back, leave a note. We see you, and you matter. By 6:00 a.m., the first offering was placed, a small basket of scones wrapped in clean linen. At 6:30, a thermos of black coffee appeared beside it. By 7:15, a single envelope rested on the seat. It held $5 and a note scribbled in pencil, "Thank you, whoever you are." Sandra watched from the kitchen window, not hiding anymore, just witnessing. By the following week, the morning bench had become a quiet miracle. Students on their way to the community college would pause and smile. Elderly veterans would sit with a cup and rest. Single moms would snag a muffin and leave a folded drawing from their child. Someone, she never found out who, started leaving copies of books wrapped in twine with handwritten notes on the cover. If you need hope today, try page 37. It spread, not as a social media post, not as a campaign, just as an idea that grew roots. A local reporter caught wind of it and published a quiet article titled "The Bakery That Saw a Ghost and Fed a Town." By month's end, the bench had to be reinforced. People were leaving so many letters, photos, folded dollar bills, and tokens of gratitude that Sandra finally placed a small donation box beside it, not for money, but for stories. Jonah called it the Archive of the Invisible. Sandra just called it sacred. One morning, months later, she found something tucked beneath the bench that made her stop cold. A single cinnamon twist, wrapped neatly, still warm. No. She looked down the alley, but no one was there. Still she smiled. Some debts are never repaid in full. Some acts ripple far beyond their origin. Sandra Portman didn't seek recognition, didn't need to tell her story at dinner parties. She simply kept baking, kept loving, kept feeding the world in her quiet way. And every morning, without fail, she refilled the thermos, left a fresh pastry, and sat beside the morning bench for 5 minutes, just long enough to remind herself that the smallest kindnesses are never truly forgotten, especially when given with no name, no condition, just heart. And in the warm breath of sunrise, the town of Copper Ridge remembered what it meant to care for one another. Because one woman, once upon a time, fed a man no one else saw, and that man, when it mattered most, made sure the whole world saw her.